Good evening, everybody, and welcome to an evening with the night for 2021. We would like to respectfully acknowledge the Boon Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation and the traditional custodians of the land throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So it's almost been a year since our last event, and here we find ourselves again in lockdown once more. I hope everyone is staying safe, and we thank you all for joining us virtually this evening. This year, our theme is Sustainable Strata, and I will shortly hand over to our newly appointed Training and Sustainability Manager, Alex Smale, to lead that discussion. The Knight are taking big steps this year to operate more sustainably. We are currently in the process of climate active certification, which will see us become a carbon neutral company, and our recently formed sustainability subcommittee are looking at ways to improve behaviours and habits amongst the Knight team. So it seemed only fitting, sustainability being a focus of the Knight this year, that it also be a main focus of an evening with the Knight. A bit later, we'll also hear from Mark Lipschitz of CLP Lawyers, who will provide an update on the upcoming changes to the Owners Corporations Act that will come into effect as of the 1st of December this year. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank our sponsors for this year: our gold sponsor, My Boss; our silver sponsors, Resolute Property Services, Resolute Property Protect, that is, Trans-Tasman Energy Group and Linkfire. And also our bronze sponsors, Marby Services, Lennox Strata Finance and Lookup Strata. So a couple of small housekeeping items before we kick into gear. For those who may not have attended a webinar before, your microphones as well as your cameras are switched off. There is the ability to ask questions of our panelists via the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. And a number of the Knight team members are also in the chat to answer any questions that may arise. Any questions that we don't get to, either in the chat or answered by the panelists, will be compiled into an FAQ sheet, which we will circulate subsequent to the event. I hope everybody finds tonight informative and enjoyable. And without further ado, I would like to now hand over to the Knight's Training and Sustainability Manager, Alex Smale, to introduce our first panel. So thank you, Alex. Over to you.
Thanks, Gregor. So I'm pleased to introduce you all to our sustainability panel for this evening. Our panelists have been chosen based on their expertise within the space. We have 4 panelists tonight. The first up is Jill Risley. Jill is the CEO of Melbourne Waste and Resource Recovery Group. They support councils to work with their communities to minimise waste and maximise resource recovery. We also have Peter Mercurio. Peter works with Yarra Energy Foundation. They're a not-for-profit whose mission is to connect people to better energy, providing services and advice for a zero carbon future. Next, we have PK, Peter Kaler. He lives in a 30-lot building in Fitzroy. He is an active committee member and started a sustainability subcommittee. He's also an active member of the local community. Last year, he launched a project called People of Gertrude Street to celebrate all things local. And finally, we have David Hamilton. David is a committee member at a 418-lot apartment complex in Southbank. They recently undertook a large project to future-proof the building by installing electric vehicle charging. So I'm ready to get into the questions. So first up, first question is to Jill. Are you able to give us some background about why the waste component of sustainability is such an important one?
Thanks, Alex, and thanks for a really important question. So here in Victoria, Melbourne's population is growing, and therefore so is the amount of waste we generate. As our population grows over the next 30 years, our waste volumes are also expected to increase. So by 2042, we expect that annually around 16.5 million tonnes of waste will need to be managed across the metropolitan region. And we have limited space in our existing landfills, and it's difficult to build new ones. That's why the Victorian government have set a target to reduce the amount of waste to to landfill by 80% by 2030 and has outlined how we're going to get there through our Recycling Victoria Circular Economy Policy and Action Plan. This means recycling or reducing our waste as much as possible, as well as looking at ways to repair, repurpose, or reuse more of what we're doing now. Otherwise, our reliance on landfills and use of virgin resources will continue. It's also important to understand that a considerable amount of the curbside rubbish bin is organic material that can be reprocessed. So you will have seen that many of Melbourne's councils have introduced what we call FOGO, so food and garden waste services, and this will divert waste out of landfill as well. Recycling materials such as glass, aluminium, metal and plastics provides great value, saves energy and water, and can be recycled and put back into the manufacturing process to make the materials again and again, or be used in making other types of products. And you will have heard a lot of talk about circular economies or circularities recently. So for example, our colleagues at Major Roads Victoria are using recycled soft plastics and glass in freeway construction projects. So in a world first in Victoria, one we're very proud of, the noise walls being constructed along the Mordialloc Freeway at Dingley are being made from 75% of recycled plastic waste collected from households across the state, half of which was disposed of in curbside recycling, such as milk and soft drink bottles, and the other half through supermarket drop-offs. This equates to 570 tonnes of plastic waste in the 1.7 kilometres of noise walls along that new stretch of freeway, which is 9.4 kilometres long, spanning from Heatherton to Dingley to Braeside and Aspendale, for those of you who know of that extension and of that area. So I think we have a couple of images to show you. Thank you, Ella, for doing that. However, for recycling to work effectively, it's important that consumers and households use their curbside bins correctly. This means putting only items in that can be recycled and putting them into the right bin. So food and garden waste into the FOGO bin and waste into the waste bin. And soon many households will be getting a fourth glass recycling bin, which was part of our Recycling Victoria announcement. When people put the wrong items in the wrong bin, it contaminates the recycling bin, making it difficult and costly to separate at the materials recycling facility, or MRFs as we call them, and later for remanufacturers when they're making new products. So to give you an example of that, if Pyrex and drinking glasses are put into the recycling bin and ends up in the glass cullet mix sent to a bottle manufacturing company, it can cause pithing in new glass bottles, so weakening the structural integrity of the new bottles. And then the whole batch of bottles has to be discarded and sent to landfill. So it's really important that we don't get that contamination in the recycling process, and we are able to educate and recycle right.
Thanks for that. The next question is also for you. So waste is a major problem at most of our buildings. What are some of the key obstacles preventing correct waste management for those in apartment buildings, and how do you overcome them?
Yeah, thanks. There are a few obstacles. One obstacle is the lack of bin and collection infrastructure in apartment buildings to recycle all of the waste streams. Another obstacle is convenience, and this is really important. People want to be sustainable and recycle, but we've got to make it easy for them. So for example, when recycling bins are located remotely, such as in a basement area, compared with the convenience of garbage chutes on every floor, experience shows us that people are more likely to use the chutes rather than walk all the way down to the basement because it's inconvenient. A lack of education and awareness on how to recycle correctly in apartments due to a lack of signage and education materials provided to new tenants is also an obstacle. My organisation, Metro, as we call ourselves, have partnered with councils to prepare education materials and signage to help building managers to better set out their waste areas and information for real estate agents to provide to new tenants when they're moving in. So councils have also been working with planners to incorporate better planning for waste management in the design and construction of new multi-unit developments, or MUDs as we call them. Many councils have also been helping existing apartments to retrofit their buildings with better signage in bin bays and where the chutes are located on each level, and providing tenants with recycling receptacles to separate and collect their recycling. Some councils have been engaging with culturally diverse groups to provide them with better and clearer understanding of how to recycle correctly. It helps for property managers and owners corporations to engage with their local council. They're a wealth of knowledge and have a lot of resources and materials to support you. Our website has a link to a lot of those resources, links to trials, related publications, case studies and reports, and good examples of buildings improving recycling in their buildings and ensuring that we've got great facilities. My colleague Zandy is here with me this evening, and we'll look at and work out how we can share a link to that toolkit, either in the chat or via email afterwards.
Okay, thank you for that. The Knight recently helped with a project you undertook to create some signage for multi-dwelling units. Have you found educating residents to be the best strategy?
Yeah, and thank you to the Knight for that collaboration. We really enjoyed working with you. Education is essential for residents to recycle effectively. However, we have found that a lack of bin infrastructure and easy and convenient access, as I mentioned, to waste and recycling bins is a significant barrier for residents in being able to recycle. Ensuring signs and signage are placed in the right locations and able to be understood by all the residents living in an apartment or townhouse development is really essential. A lot of effort was put into designing signage that is simple, clear, using visual images and avoiding text. It was great having the Knight's input and helping to clarify what would work best in a multi-unit development or a MUD. We have, and I think we'll share hopefully on the screen some of the images of our moving in and moving out brochure, recycling bin sticker, and the bin area signage that we've produced and are available for everyone to use free of charge. And these can be modified and included in building, including building or council logos, or with specific site information on them. So those resources are available and can be downloaded from our website. And as I said, they're free to use. We really encourage people to use them and access that toolkit. It is full of great resources and knowledge and information and tips. And as I said, we'll provide a link to this afterwards, and also Zandy's contact information. She's really, I'll dob you in here, Zandy, really happy to take calls and emails from people who are keen to use those materials or get further information.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're moving away from waste and into energy now. The next set of questions are from Peter, for Peter from Yarra Energy Foundation. Another important challenge for strata buildings is managing energy consumption. What are some key areas for apartment dwellers to consider when looking to reduce their energy use?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alex. And thanks for putting this on and coordinating and organising. And Jill, thanks for your comments just then. My master's was in waste and I found that very interesting, but I found my way into energy because I couldn't get a job in waste at the time over 10 years ago. But back to your question, Alex. Look, there's a lot of things that apartments can and can't do. Apartments are limited depending on the building size. Ultimately, what you really want is someone like PK, a champion of the building, to really foster and fast track a lot of these processes. Fundamentally, a lot of the low-hanging fruit has already been done. What I mean by that, and I am talking quickly because I'm conscious of time and there's a lot to get through. But that is changing out existing light bulbs for LEDs. That's a really fast and surefire way of doing that. A lot of the lighting companies, Beacon Lighting, for example, is actually one of the biggest users of the Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificates, which might be a one-for-one replacement, meaning that there's no cost to you, the owner's corp or other. So that's one off the top of the head. Bang. Also, you can use services like the Yarra Energy Foundation, for example, of which we're a not-for-profit and independent organisation that is funded by, well, our main funder is City of Yarra, and Now it seems that Sustainability Victoria are now a major funder of ours as well. So our services are free. So we can source solar quotes for you. We can source an energy assessment for you. We can advise you of what to do and what the best course of action for your building is. It's always good to start off with looking at solar predominantly, and then maybe backtracking and doing an energy assessment as well. You've got to think very logically, what are the biggest energy users of the building? So typically it's HVAC, heating and air conditioning. That only really applies to newer builds, not so much your old orange brick 70s and 80s builds. Newer buildings have unfortunately limited roof space for solar. Doesn't mean you shouldn't get solar, or it doesn't mean it's a worthwhile venture. But then at the end of the day, some buildings are privy to what we call embedded networks, and that's usually a cheaper rate than you would get on the retail market. But I would argue you can get a better rate at the moment, whether it be 100% renewable or 10% or 50%. Again, that's something the Yarra Energy Foundation can help you with. But it does start with, look at your lighting, look at your HVAC. If you don't know what that means, come to the Yarra Energy Foundation. We'll certainly put you on the course of right action or the best action for your building. We'll certainly tailor it. But yeah, look, at the moment, what I'm seeing, I have a great building in Burnley, apartment building of 18 units, most of which are owner occupier. It's a great example of potentially using a solution where you get one big solar array and everyone shares that. A couple miss out on sharing that, but they can have their own individual systems because the roof space allows for that. So there's some significant savings right there. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks for that. We are seeing a lot more buildings are getting interested in solar. Can you explain some of the barriers that they may face? Yeah,
most definitely. It's really it's a shame actually, because it's all tied up into the building code and planning with council. So a lot of the decisions, unfortunately, are out of our hands at the Yarra Energy Foundation. We can advocate, and we do with a collective group called the Million Homes Alliance, for example. We still struggle with new buildings going up and shading existing solar, but that's still being worked on and worked at, and we're advocating state government to change some of those rules and plans. They are limitations in your decision-making. There are uncertainties in that decision-making process. Look, the best way to understand whether solar is right for your building is starting from getting a quote. And through the Yarra Energy Foundation, we run a comprehensive vetting system with solar suppliers that are right for each individual or each building per se. There's a lot of solar companies out there. You still have to rifle through the rubbish, so to speak, Jill, to find the best groups that are there to really work for you. So that's where we come in. Where we act as a broker, if you will, and make sure you're well informed and have the skills and the knowledge to make the right decisions. Whether that's brokering a new retailer deal, we're also able to do that. But with solar, best place to start is getting a quote. So we have a preferred supplier list who are able to put that together soon enough. We're just partnering with a new group called Boom Energy that does the whole gamut. It's just a half an hour sit down with me and we can pump it out pretty quickly. But your roof size is going to be a limitation. Is it an old building or a new building? Are you using the solar to power your communal areas? How much energy are you using during the day? If you have car park lighting, like I said, if you've got heating and cooling in the hallways, then solar is probably the right decision to make. The size of that system will no doubt be limited to your roof size. In saying that, the efficiency of panels, individual panels, over the past 2 years has grown by 130 watts. For those of you playing at home, panels used to be about 270 watts. 10 years ago, they used to be 150 watts. We can get panels today at 400 watts, and around the corner in the future, it's very likely to be around 500, potentially 700 watts per panel. Reason why that's really important, you times that 400, 500, 700 watt panel by the number of panels, and you get an increased size system for fewer panels. So those with smaller roof spaces, you get a higher capacity, meaning you get to use more of your own energy. So all this is happening down the line. And if you go to the F website and sign on, we're able to tell you and inform you when these things are happening. So perhaps your building isn't right for solar today, but it possibly will be in a year's time when you need 10 fewer panels for the same capacity.
Thank you for that. Moving on to our committee member perspective. So PK, your building in Fitzroy has taken a proactive approach to becoming more sustainable. Can you tell us a little bit about the sustainability subcommittee you formed and how it has helped your building?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I also just want to do a bit of a shout out to, it's so good that we've got 126 people on this Zoom. I'm trying to imagine if this was a committee, how this would be functioning. But the fact that 126 possible buildings across Victoria, and think about the positive impact that this Zoom and this conversation can have to our broader community. Our sustainability subcommittee was really born with the goal of saving our owners money by reducing our buildings' running costs, and creating a smaller environmental footprint has really been a bonus for our community. And now, whilst, as Jill has mentioned, there are many elements of sustainability, our committee has chosen over the last year to work on energy as our initial focus. Firstly, the reduction of energy usage in our building. Secondly, switching over our common power plan to green energy. And third, producing our own renewable energy via rooftop solar. In my building, about 12% of our annual budget has been going to electricity. And despite our complex only being 3 years old, there was still a number of inefficiencies that we identified, including fluorescent lighting fitted to our car park levels. And as Peter mentioned earlier, LEDs are a relatively easy win for a complex, and government funding paid for by the majority through an upgrade through the Victorian Energy Upgrades program makes it very affordable to change. Though with sustainability in mind, we did a lot of research to ensure that the most efficient and longest lasting LED was available. When you're purchasing hundreds, or for some of your buildings, thousands of light fittings for your complex, and you're also using owners' money to do so, it's obvious that you need to exercise as a committee member due diligence and ensure that the lights are fit for purpose for your building. And so our electrician put forward their standard LED they use for building upgrades, which was a decent light fitting with a 50,000 hour lifespan, which will last you 6 years on 24 hours a day, which is pretty good. Some entry level LEDs have a limited functionality, which means that they're on 100% power 24 hours a day. Now, we didn't want that for our building because we wanted to save as much energy as we could. So the sustainability subcommittee, we did a bit of research and we contacted a car parking company in the city, and we found out the type of LEDs that they were using, and we ended up finding and installing a product with a lifespan of 160,000 hours. So that's 18 years on 24 hours a day, 3 times longer than what the electrician originally put forward. And they also have inbuilt individual motion sensors that power them up from 20% to 100%. And being across small details like this end up costing or saving tens, maybe thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars over the life of the LED. And so we chose a sustainable choice, which was buying the quality product once versus the cheaper one purchased 3 times. And by doing that, we saw our energy bill fall by 40%, which is a huge number overnight. So we're really happy with that simple reduction with our LEDs.
And Gertrude Street recently got approval for solar. Can you describe what that process was like, and if you have any advice to other owners starting their solar journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've learned so much on this journey, and it takes, I've learned that it takes one person to champion and keep momentum in the project. And most often initiatives like this die because of an apathy rather than opposition. And I'd say that you need to be prepared with solar to be putting in work over probably a 4 to 10 month period. Solar doesn't happen in 3 weeks. There's time and due diligence. And once you've determined if rooftop panels are going to be technically possible on your building, and as Pete mentioned, certainly the Yarra Energy Foundation are worth talking to. My building started our journey with YEF, and they were been a great support. It's important to understand that the major obstacle to overcome is getting 50% of owners to vote as a special resolution is required to alter common roof. Now, before you get to that point of the special resolution, you need to focus on having your committee on board to approve taking it to a ballot. And you do this, or at least we did this, by being across the details and anticipating the questions you're going to have and the objections. The first one being, how much money is solar going to save owners? How are we paying for the installation? If you are planning on borrowing to finance a system or raising a special levy, know what the rate and the paybacks will be. Consider the installation method. Most solar panels use a clip lock system to attach the roof without penetrating the roof. But most owners will fear that the individual panels are going to be puncturing holes in the roof. And so, what are the implications for waterproofing? Most of the installers will obviously have a waterproofing guarantee. So knowing that and being able to convey that to owners and keeping your builder informed of the process in respect to your builder's warranty. In my case, I had a committee member that was, certainly throwing a lot of challenges and opposition to our project. And so we overcame a lot of their concerns by appointing an independent engineer, which only cost $1,000 to review the proposal and the drawings. And that appeased some concerns from the committee member in my building. We also, similar to the LEDs, we made sure that we chose the highest quality product that you can find with the longest available warranty. If there's a solar panel on the market with a 30-year warranty, choose that over the one with a 10-year, as you'll be receiving far greater value over the longer term. And temperature and our climate is going to be getting hotter as each year goes by. Considering what impacts will the solar panels have on the window cleaners anchor points, if you have them, and what design changes need to be made to those. What requirements does the Strata insurance have? The solar panels need to connect to an internet connection to provide reporting on the performance. So is there a lot owner on the top floor or the ground floor with an existing internet connection that you can piggyback off? And then also, how will the panels be cleaned each year? And you can generally add that to your window cleaning scope as well, because the efficient panels need to be cleaned. What's probably most important is expect objections from committee. And don't assume everyone is going to be supportive of your idea. There'll be members of the committee that are against it, but don't let the loud voices of the opposition drown out people who are quietly in favour of a positive proposal. At committee meetings, it is good to ensure that everyone expresses their opinion, and this can be done simply by calling a vote if needed. If you've done the work to get the committee on board, it makes the process of passing the special resolution somewhat easier.
Thanks, PK. Another area we're seeing a lot of interest in is electric vehicle charging. I know I personally have a lot of buildings that are currently looking into it. So this question is, David, you've taken an active role in improving your building. Can you tell us a bit about your EV journey?
Well, thanks, Alex. That is actually a great question because it was a journey. And it wasn't just a simple one. It actually started about 5 years ago. But it began in earnest in December 2019. And it finished on Christmas Eve in 2020. And at that time, or by that time, we had then had 22 owners with their car parks made EV ready. We had our first charging sessions going live, and that 22 owners constituted about 28% of the owners who actually are owner-occupiers in the building at Triptych. What we, in fact, achieved was probably the largest retrofitting of a high-rise apartment building in Australia, and definitely one of the larger ones around the world. Interestingly, that actually reflected the market research that we'd done along the way with our owners. And when we surveyed them about whether they'd consider buying an EV if charging was available in their car park, that elicited about 25% of owners would buy an EV in the next 2 years. And not only that, it changed their attitude as to the type of vehicle that they would be buying, that being able to charge their car in their lot, not at a common charging station, was really important. When we started back in 2019, we had 2 electric vehicles, and they were only parked here part-time. And because those owners lived in regional Victoria, travelled up and down. So the journey was between first deciding to examine and having that operating was a really interesting journey, because EVs and EV charging in apartment buildings can be quite an emotive issue when it needn't be. People somehow confuse electric vehicles with climate change, and suddenly it becomes a very emotive issue. But what you're really doing is enabling those people who buy an EV and live in an apartment to have the same capability to charge their car as someone who lives in a single unit dwelling in the suburbs. Nothing more, just being able to build that capability back into a building that was not there at the outset. Now, when we started, we thought this isn't just a simple way, go out, find some hardware, get it installed. But the more we looked at it, we realised we just had to rethink the whole issue. That if we discarded the notion that just contact a supplier and have them install a charger, they were going to just push their own hardware down our throat and come up with their solution. Because retrofitting an apartment building is actually quite complex. So secondly, we then shifted our thinking, and we needed to realise that charging an electric vehicle, the solution, it was just like charging a mobile phone. What people want to be able to do is come home, plug their car in, get up in the morning, drive out, come home, plug the car in, drive out, come home. That cycle is just like charging your mobile phone. And therefore, you need a solution that enables that to occur. And that means you rule out central charging solutions. That is, putting it in a loading bay or a visitor car parking space. Because the lessons that we've learnt and we saw is that where that's been used as the solution, it's a nightmare. And in fact, we as an owners corporation or as a committee of management spent a lot of time trying to solve, how would we manage it? When we discarded that thinking, it opened up our mind. So finally, we reversed the way of thinking about the problem. So we started with a set of principles that should guide our thinking about how you implement an electric vehicle charging strategy. And key amongst those principles were things like we wanted an open architecture, didn't want to lock people into a specific charger. Secondly, we needed to scrupulously apply the benefit principle. so that cost recovery was clear to all owners, because one of the emotive subjects is always about who's paying for it. I'm not getting a benefit. They're getting a benefit. Who pays for the electricity? How can we be certain that the electricity is paid for? So once we solved all of those, so we could apply the benefit principle so that cost recovery was clear to people. And so that those who paid, those with an EV would be paying the full cost of what they needed to the hardware, the infrastructure that was needed to connect to them, as well as the electricity. But the owners' corporation should pay for those elements that improve the value to all apartments in the building, because now this is a building where people can advertise their apartment that you can charge you've got EV charging capability. You can make your car park EV ready. So from that, we developed a strategy. We addressed firstly the legal issues, then the commercial issues, and finally we found a technical solution that would meet our requirements, instead of finding an engineering solution and then trying to ram that into the building. So ultimately, what have we ended up with? We've now got a capability that all 157 owners can make their car park EV ready if they want to. Everybody will be able to have charge an electric vehicle. Billing is managed remotely, and so we cost recover all the electricity. And we've got a load management solution that means that these vehicles can all be charged, and the building's own infrastructure is similarly managed. So at the end of the day, not only do we have 22 owners that have made their car park EV ready, we've got 12 chargers installed. We've now got 8 electric vehicles in the building, up from the 2 that we had 12 months before. We've got an EV charging strategy, and it's been delivered so that anybody can be able to get charging into their own car park if they want it. So that was the journey, quite a journey. And it took quite a while to bring a lot of people along.
Thank you for that. I'm just a bit conscious of time because I'm sure a lot of people want to hear about the changes to the Act. So would you possibly be able to briefly describe how people can get started, if you have any advice, and how you got buy-in from your community?
Well, it's interesting. Since we finished this, I'm now talking with 5 other buildings about doing the same thing. And I think that getting started is firstly deciding that you think this is an important thing, this is an important issue, this is an important asset that you should bring into the building, and that all owners will benefit from it. Sorting out the question of the benefits, of who benefits and how costs are recovered, overcomes a lot of the inertia. And I think engaging with your community, flagging and having a communication strategy about this is what we're doing, this is what we're thinking of doing, and doing some market research, engaging with people via surveys. So we ran an anonymous surveys that surveyed owners. What were their intentions? How did they feel about it? What were their opinions about electric vehicles was one of the areas that we looked at. So we flushed out the hot button issues for owners, and then we could address them in a final strategy and then in our policies. So I think that's probably key, working your way through that, and not just running out to a supplier and saying, please send equipment, or what do you think we should do? Because the supplier will always tell you, buy my equipment.
Yeah.
Alex, I might just interrupt for just a moment with David talking, because he touches on a really good point, and I think it might be helpful for everyone who's here tonight. YEF is a really good starting point, actually, to assist you in providing you with the material to start this process. So if you needed templates of a survey, if you needed survey questions done, we can produce that for you. We've produced it for others. So it's not a hard task. And, you know, we're a not-for-profit, we're a no-cost. Our funding is external from that. We just want to make sure that we transition everybody and provide access to renewable solutions. And that's the same with when PK was talking earlier. A lot of the hard work is community engagement. And so we can provide you with that comms plan. We can provide you with letters or a survey, like I said before. Yeah, it just takes that champion, really.
Yeah, definitely. PK is someone who also knows quite a bit about getting buy-in from the community. Do you have any tips from your experience in getting solar approved?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess following on from what I was talking about earlier, which was getting the committee on board. Once you've got the committee on board, the next stage is really getting the owners on board. Depending on the size of your complex, there could be 1,000 owners, there could be 15. In order to pass the special resolution for solar, you need to be persuasive and informative, and you need 50% of those owners to support it. You also, it's beneficial to be factual, accurate, act in good faith, and adopt some marketing 101, because you really want to give your ballot every chance of success. And there's nothing worse than a dull letter from OC management asking you to tick a box and return it. So you need to bring the project to life and ensure you have drafted the correspondence the Knight is sending out to ensure it's persuasive and communicates the financial benefits of the project. Assume owners are not eco-conscious. It's a really important one. And use language like, we are seeking your support so we can make a positive step forward to save owners money, reduce electricity usage, reduce our buildings' running costs, and you're achieving sustainability by stealth. You know, you're leading with the cost savings. In my building, we first tried to get the special resolution passed at a meeting, but just fell short of the required numbers by a couple of votes. So we turned this into an info night to address any potential concerns. And I do believe that this helped in getting more votes when we did the ballot. And continuing, consider including a link to a video of you and maybe the sustainability subcommittee discussing the project with a Q&A. We did that, and it was really effective to communicate the benefits of the project. The ballot paperwork should detail the costs and answer many of the potential objections that you've already had to overcome with your committee. Highlight how much money the government rebate is kicking in, because owners like free cash, and demonstrating there's a greater value than what we're actually financing is important. More of us, as David's mentioned, are going to be driving electric vehicles in the coming years. So ballots are a lot of work. Use the opportunity of a solar ballot as an opportunity to also get approval for EV charging in the car parks, or vice versa. Engage with other owners you know in the building to encourage them to return their voting paperwork. Tenants don't have a vote, but owners do. So it's important to know the difference. You might consider establishing a building WhatsApp, which is great to foster community in the building, but it's also an effective communication channel to promote the project and the ballot and returning paperwork. Some lot owners' votes count more than others. So if you have a large commercial tenant in your building with a huge footprint there, or an owner with a very large apartment, their vote often has more weight. And so be sure to engage them as well. These principles of, marketing 101, being persuasive and communicating the benefits, apply whether or not you have a complex of 5 or you have a complex of 500. If you've got the roof space and it's technically possible to do solar on your roof and to have renewable clean energy producing on your rooftop, the main hurdle is you need to sell it to the owners. So that's it for now.
Thanks, PK. We're going back to Peter from your Energy Foundation. So there are many factors that influence if these projects can be undertaken: roof space, shadowing, infrastructure. Can you share some alternatives for those properties where solar is not viable, and any other possible improvements?
Yeah, definitely, Alex. And thanks for asking that question, because it's a pretty important one, particularly as it pertains to a lot of work the Energy Foundation have been doing, particularly over the past 12 months. What we have been doing, we have a formal partnership with City Power, Powercore, which probably is the distributor in a lot of everyone's areas, as well as ANU, Australian National University, to come to realise a huge missing link, I suppose, in the grid network, and that is batteries. Not large scale, but community-led batteries. So we're organising with City Power how to deliver and replicate neighbourhood batteries across their grid network, which obviously includes apartments. Now, that's really helpful, particularly if you're going to roll out EV charging stations to carry that load, carry that voltage. At the same time, you can draw off the power from that battery, which is tied to what we would consider a power purchase agreement, so to speak. Not technically accurate, but that's pretty much what it is. And so what that means is this power purchase agreement, or the way in which we broker services with retailers, is that the power that is feeding into that battery in an apartment, for example, as opposed to on a residential block, will be fed by 100% renewable energy. So, at night when you're drawing from that community battery of everyone in that apartment, that will be 100% renewable power at a price that is much less than what you're probably paying for today. So that embedded network, which you may be tied to as a building, which is kind of done prior to that building even being developed. It's a contractual obligation between the developer and a chosen retailer that helps fund different types of assets within the building itself, which is why developers tie into that. But as those contracts tend to come to an end, whether it be 3 years or 5 years or 7, it's a really great opportunity to have a chat with us and see what we can do in terms of brokering you a cheaper deal than you're probably already paying, whether it's an individual or as a body corporate as a whole. We certainly fit in that. So I think that's really rounding out this whole sustainability full circle discussion. That's the end point that we're trying to get to, really, powering the whole building by 100% renewable. So if you can't have solar that does that for you, we can facilitate that and make that done faster. The community battery space is really growing, but that ties into these other services that round out, particularly for an apartment building.
Thank you for that. My final question for the night, it's open to the panel, but I might just start with Jill because we haven't heard from her in a while. What is your vision or hope for the apartment sector? What changes are you hoping to see in the near future?
That's a good question. Thanks, Alex. I think from a Victorian government perspective, the Recycling Victoria policy and action plan sets out our vision, which is very much around, it's quite comprehensive, but focusing on the apartments and what apartments can do. We want to see a recycling service, a separate glass service, and a food and organic recycling service for all households in Victoria. And to support that, we're going to have a statewide education and behaviour change program. So what you'll be seeing is residents and owners are going to become a lot more aware of the recycling opportunities and facilities and how to recycle. So the state's very much leaning in and sort of providing that support. We'll also be rolling out a container deposit scheme, or a CDS, as many of you will have seen operate in other states, and Victoria is getting one as well, which is really exciting. So again, consumers and residents are going to be getting a lot more engaged in recycling and waste management. Personally, what I'd like to see is people loving where they live, and part of loving where you live means that you feel good about your footprint and you're able to make a tangible contribution to managing consumption and waste and your footprint on the environment. And we do see, we know research says that people want to be sustainable. You've just got to make it easy for them, and you've got to manage the costs involved with that. And look, one of the great things about waste, and waste is a little bit like energy, but I'd say a little bit behind. People just used to plug something into the wall and not really think about it. Now everybody's thinking about it and thinking about where their energy comes from. I think people are starting to do that with waste, and we're starting to see people wanting to really understand how they can recycle and how they can reduce their waste, and linking that to a more sustainable lifestyle. So in doing that, I'd love to see apartments considering recycling and waste in the planning, in the retrofitting, and also making sure that it's really easy for residents to understand how they can reduce their waste and increase their resource recovery. On the bright side, from a cost perspective, the cost of disposing of waste is high and going to increase. So what we're seeing is the rollout and adoption of some of the nice to have at the moment will suddenly become commercially and economically cheaper and offset those costs. So I think we're about to see a bit of a game change in the way that people manage waste and recycling, and we're really excited about it.
Okay, that question is open to any other panelists, if anyone wants to chime in with their thoughts.
Yeah, I might jump in. Pete was mentioning, the opportunity earlier for those that solar's not an option for, a simple choice in moving over to, a green power provider. Like if your common property, common energy providers, AGL, Energy Australia, or Origin Energy, I mean, these companies dominate the top of the list of greenhouse gas emitters in Australia. So you can, with relative ease, move to using green power in a matter of weeks. So that's one option. But I've certainly sort of covered a lot of detail tonight in relation to installing solar on your common rooftop. And I think that it's important to know that it can be done. When I initially reached out to the Knight about 1.5 years ago, and I said, I'd love to talk with another building that has installed solar, common solar, that list was very, very small, and if not existing at all. And so the path that I've been on in the last year to get this project across the line has certainly been one that has demonstrated that it's possible, and will, no doubt after this session, we'll be forwarding out some information that can kind of help as a bit of a guide to getting your committee and your building on board with choosing renewable energy.
I'm just conscious that we're running out of time, so I might hand back over to Gregor, and we can see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you all panelists for a very insightful discussion. Just one question that has popped up a little bit is in terms of funding these projects. Now, PK, you did mention about government grants and borrowing funds, and also the ability to strike a special levy. Are you able to touch on your approach for your Gertrude Street property, please?
Yeah. So we had our installation cost was $40,000, and we decided that we would finance that by raising 20,000 via special levy, which was across 30 owners, and then we'd borrow the other 20,000, which is effectively through a green loan, which we'd be paying off over the number of years. The reduction that we would have in our energy usage almost instantly would certainly offset any of the cost of borrowing funds to do that. And when we presented that scenario of a 50-50 mix to owners, they liked it, and we're happy to kick in some money now with the special levy, and then we can use some financed funds to pay for the rest of the project.
Fantastic. And just in terms of the payback time for that project, was it over a 5-year, 10-year period?
We're at a 7-year payback. So you can certainly have shorter, you can certainly have longer. Our building has some complexities with the roof, so we had to do a little bit of extra sort of engineering to work around it. But 7 years was certainly a number that our owners were happy with.
Fantastic.
Just to add to that, Gregor, real briefly, and I know PK's building fairly well. It probably is one of the more complicated installs to do, which adds to the cost. So it's not necessarily the solar that's the expensive part, it is the cost of install. So that's not going to be the same payback for all groups here tonight. So don't be put off by that, even though it's not that far in the future. But I've seen paybacks as short as 3 years for certain apartment buildings. Commercially, for a business, it can be less than 2. Generally speaking, for standalone house, it's about 3 these days. So, and back to your point, Gregor, about financing, there's something called environmental upgrade agreements. A lot of councils have to sign on to do that. That is predominantly for commercial with a minimum spend of 15,000. However, depending on how that body corporate's listed, you might qualify. And at the same time, I do know that state government is now including that for residential, which is including apartments. Still more details on that to come, but that's, that we'll know in due course, no doubt.
So just on that, is there a lending option there, Peter, in terms of that?
Yes, it is. Sorry. Yeah, you pay off the system through your council rates at very low cost interest on that.
Okay.
And through the Australian Sustainability Fund predominantly, but there are other lenders that partake in that mechanism.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Jill, just a quick one for you. A bit of talk online about the food organics waste and it being a new thing in a lot of councils. So for owners corporations that have a private waste contractor, we're seeing for new properties the requirement for FOGO bins, and obviously the private contractor would remove that waste. For council collections, how's that being implemented, and what are you seeing at this point in time?
Yeah, so a lot's happening in that space from a funding perspective as well. Just from a waste and recycling, our colleagues at Sustainability Victoria have a number of grants and grant rounds, and if you sign up to our newsletter on our website, we let people know when those grants are available, particularly for larger organisations as well as community and councils. From a FOGO perspective, we are seeing, once you're at 151 or 300 apartments, that there's a scale difference. So it really does depend on the size of the complex that you're managing, what the solution should be. Almost all apartments and MUDs tend to have, almost all. There are a few councils that offer services for those complexes, but almost all, as you say, Gregor, are using private companies. There are services available, absolutely, to change the way in which you are recycling or resource recovering within your facilities. It does depend on the size and the complexity and what's available, and space particularly for those facilities. So there is some information in the toolkit, so I'd really encourage people to download it. If you're of a scale where you're looking really at C&I, which is what we call it, commercial and industrial waste, There are really great examples and case studies. We launched one last week about the Queen Victoria market, and that case study is how store holders at the market have collaborated to introduce a FOGO service for the market. And you can imagine the quantities of waste there. So there are really innovative solutions that you can get on site. There are services that you can also get depending on the size and scale you're talking about.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jill. Also, a lot of discussion about resources, getting access to a couple of the resources mentioned tonight. So subsequent to this, this Zoom session, we'll be sending out an email to all participants with a link to a lot of the resources, including the Metro Waste Recovery Group, the Yarra Energy Foundation, and potentially a couple of the, I guess, details regarding some of the products used. I haven't asked you for permission yet, PK, but maybe talking about the type of globes that you've used in your apartment complex, as well as the company that you've engaged as the engineer as well. So just conscious of time, we've got to move on, but I just want to say a very big thank you to yourselves for providing all the insight. So for Jill, Peter, PK and David, thank you very much for coming on board tonight and demonstrating your passion, talking about sustainability, and very much hoping that a number of people take away a number of golden nuggets in terms of what's been discussed. So thank you very much.